Hello and welcome to today's remote session. This is Tom Bechtold. I'm your host today as we talk about ransomware as a service attackers, how they work, and how you can fight back. I want to say thank you to the folks over at Semperis for making today's remote session possible. So like normal, I have some comments that I'm going to make about the topic. Normally I kind of come on and I just have a problem with ransomware people and people who use it. Just thieves in general, really. They just kind of bother me. But ransomware is a service. This is just another tool in the belt of this modern cyber criminal. It's something that, we're adding it into that as a family of services, right? So it's crime as a service, ransomware as a service, you name it, right? It's in there. And it couldn't happen to a better piece of malware, right? It's just so popular right now. Everybody seems to be just embracing it. I'm being facetious. We got to get our arms around this. But I want to take a moment, though. This reminded me of something from last week's Secure World Government virtual conference. We had the Secret Service on, and the agent that we were talking to on the fireside chat reminded us this week, July 1st, is a Friday. A lot of people have Friday off, as well as the following Monday for the holiday. This is going to be a long holiday weekend. So just take a moment as we're preparing and getting through this week, getting ready to spend time with our family, travel, do whatever, right? Just be extra vigilant. Just watch out. You don't want to get that call Friday afternoon that something has just happened at work and now your network is a shambles. You've gotten that ransomware note or whatever the case is. Just be careful. That's the only thing I want to say is just watch out, be extra vigilant, and have a great 4th of July weekend. So that's the only thing I really want to say. I know it's Tuesday, but that's what I want to drive home. So who are we talking to today? Well, ransomware. We're working with, like I said, the folks over at Semperis. We're working with Alexandra Weaver, Solutions Architect, and Mr. Sean Doobie, the Director of Services there. We're going to get to them in just a minute. I just want to give you guys some quick reminders on housekeeping. We have today's slides, a bunch of different URLs, some really cool blog stuff. If you're trying to get your arms around ransomware, Semperis has hooked us up today. There's a lot of good stuff in there, so take a minute, download those PDFs, grab those URLs, or at least save them for later on. Have those available for you. These are going to be good things for you to review. If you have questions as we go through today's program, put those in the box, please. I'm going to be fielding those as we get toward the end of the program. I'm also going to try to stump the two of these with two of our presenters with my questions. So we'll see how that goes. After about 45, 50 minutes, you can download the certificate of attendance for today's program. So it's a pop-up, so you might have to enable that. If you have any problems, just shoot me a quick email. I'll hook you up there. We are recording this today, so if you see something that you like, you missed it, didn't write down notes, or you want to share it with a colleague, use the same link. Share that with your friends, family, coworkers, whoever. Like I said, we want to get the word out and make people aware of all of this stuff and how to help keep everything safe. So I'm going to get off my soapbox now and let everybody hear from our two experts. Over to Sean and Alexandra. Welcome to the two of you to the show. The floor is yours. Take it away.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Alexandra and I have a hard time saying Alexandra, but
I know.
She and I have a long work history together. We were both for many years on Intel's Active Directory team. So we have a lot of experience in the ins and outs of Active Directory and what it's like to really live in an environment like that. And Alex, oops, I said it. There I go, and I said it.
It's okay.
Is also, among other things, for Nike as well. So a lot of background. Back in the day, we used to just call ourselves AD administrators, and now we're sort of more identity and security professionals. So I'm gonna pre-apologize because I have a bit of a dry cough I've been trying to shake. So if I suddenly go on mute, it's because I don't want to subject you to that cough. Alex mentioned to me, and I actually have this, I had forgotten, but I have this on my calendar. Given this topic, this is the most appropriate time to mention that yesterday was the 5-year anniversary of when Russia released the NotPetya cyber weapon against Ukraine, which caused extensive infrastructure damage in Ukraine, but at the time it was a non-targeted weapon, and it spread throughout the world causing approximately $10 billion worth of damage around the world. And most notably, or the highest profile one, was the damage it inflicted on Maersk, the world's largest shipping company. Anybody that's involved in information security should know the story of Maersk. And I can't provide you URLs easily right here to tell you about it, but there's two things you can do to learn more about Maersk. One is an article by Andy Greenberg in Wired magazine that talks about NotPetya, and that's sort of the reference article for everybody. There's another one, and that is by a fellow named Gavin Ashton, if you look him up on the web. And he wrote his personal recollections of his experience on the team recovering from NotPetya. And it's some scary stuff. It's some scary stuff, isn't it, Alix?
It is, and what an anniversary to remember as we kick off this topic. Yeah. It really changed. I mean, I think for me, it was a very big game changer in how, this has become almost prolific, right, in corporations and how they handle the situation. It was very different than prior, right? They went public, all these things. So it's a big day, especially as, Tom was just saying, we approach yet another holiday weekend. Right. And every time, at least in the back of my mind, I do think about, oh boy, this is a long weekend. And, we're all ready. We're all standing ready. Right.
Well, so but today we're going to be talking about, ransomware and trends and what you can do. So
yes,
very high level agenda of what we're going to be talking about is let's talk about a little baselining on ransomware and where it has gone. Talk about the ransomware ecosystem as it has continued to expand, the targeted vulnerabilities that data is showing, where ransomware typically comes in and the advantages they take of the vulnerabilities. And most importantly in this, because this is the part you probably care about the most, what steps you can take to make yourself less of a victim.
Yes.
So let's talk about the ransomware itself and the RaaS trends. And sort of to open this up, I want to give you my thoughts about where this has come from and the changes that are being made to ransomware that we see. All sort of boils down to if you think of them as capitalists without a conscience. Ransomware actors as capitalists without a conscience. So what that means is you can take pretty much all of this behavior and boil it down to 3 or 4 or so goals. First is maximize profit. The second is minimize overhead. The third is minimize time, because of course all of this helps maximize profit. And the fourth, which has come along relatively recently, is to avoid undue law enforcement scrutiny, because after all, it affects number one.
Yeah.
And if you think about it in a broader context, sorry, Alix, go ahead.
No. I was just going to add that it's capitalism, but it's an infected version, right? It's a mirror image of contemporary capitalism with a disruptive business model, right? It's turned into a real economy. And it's very interesting to see it evolve where they now have cryptocurrency and they're escaping all the normal and legal processes within capitalism. Now, that's just a different discussion aside, but what we can see happening and what we can see evolving is, exactly what you're speaking to is maximizing profits, reducing their overhead, and expanding and growing their business model. And they're doing it well. So it's capitalism, I want to say, at its finest, but it's also being used for evil and bypassing our normal rules and regs, right? And our processes and a lot of our systems. It's disheartening, to say the least.
I think you definitely nailed it when you called it disruptive, though. I mean, this has got to be the poster child for disruptive.
It is.
So if you take that viewpoint and you look back on how ransomware has evolved, it all completely makes sense. So if you think it, when it first came about, it was crypto locking your environment and then extorting you for the key. Then we came to extortion through exfiltration. So we not only could extort you because we've crypto locked the environment, but we've also taken your data out and can threaten you with that. Then because let's say, after all, let's remove the conscience part to it. Let's say we extort you for the data. What's to keep you from being extorted a second time in 6 months or so? Because you still have the threat actors still have the data.
Yes.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, we lied. No, we're going to require you to pay again to keep us from releasing the data.
Yep.
Then we got time to release, which is a particularly evil little twist, where they say, "Oh, I'm sorry, this is it's automatically timed. There's nothing we can do about it. It'll automatically release on Thursday unless we, put an anti-trigger in there." Critical infrastructure, because they can't afford to be down, so they're more likely to pay and pay big.
Right.
Something we're going to talk about in a little bit is segmentation. As this has proved so profitable and growing, as how the whole business has grown, I guess you would say, horizontally. And then, of course, the rise of ransomware as a service itself, because that maximizes profit, it minimizes time, and it minimizes overhead.
It does. And what's interesting to see is this evolution and how it is becoming a part of our organization and the risk analysis here. We know that ransomware, unfortunately, is becoming, I don't want to say prevalent, but in a way it really is. And we're seeing it evolve at a rapid rate. We're hearing about it more and more frequently. And it is a concern, and it has to be part of our, our business plan, our risk analysis. We want to make sure that we factor this into, our, our day-to-day operations. And there are different models, returning to this slide, of the business models for the cyber criminals, right? So how great that they've thought of all the different ways, again, that they can make money, being the main point that we discussed earlier. So they have a monthly subscription, a flat fee, an affiliate program, so similar to a pyramid scheme. So the profits going to the developers. They have commission-based and then profit sharing. So they have a business model for each person, and the entry point is now lower, right? Because these are RaaS kits that are for sale. So you don't have technical barriers to entry anymore. So in a way, it is prolific. You can go out and buy these kits and be a part of this and make money. And it's a revenue generating model in all of the different business models for those cyber criminals. So it is, deeply concerning. The ultimate goal is financial gain, and it is without a conscience. You're stealing people's data, you're encrypting it, then you're, threatening them or saying, "I'll give you the keys back, but ... And we can get into that too. But this is a great concern because everything has been moving towards, cloud-based operations. And this is what we're seeing here, is an evolution of this with RaaS, with ransomware.
Yeah, I think there's one of the interesting aspects of this, of ransomware as a service, and again, this maps to regular capitalism, is you lower the barrier of entry. And so what you have now, less skilled individuals executing executing ransomware attacks because it's easier. It used to be, sophisticated attacks used to be the purview of nation states, but it's gotten much, much easier. And one of the pieces of fallout a ransomware expert whose comments I pay attention to has said that because the barrier has been lowered, there's less discrimination of targets now than there used to be. So not that it was broadly very civil before, but it's less and less because
it is.
Pretty much anyone can get into the business now.
Right. And there is no ethics among thieves, right? There once was, where healthcare and schools were off limits. We're not seeing that anymore. We're now seeing where institutions are specifically targeted based on, their sector. And we spoke to that earlier, agricultural, we see all of these different impacts or sectors of society impacted. And even if you don't work in one of those, you're still going to be impacted by one of those. I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but we're
Right.
talking about the next slide, the evolution of extortion. And this is really, they've upped their game. So making it not easy to just acquire and deploy, but also making it financially worthwhile to folks, and then offering multiple methods of increasing their profits, right? So they're now being implemented to, again, gain more money. They get in, they're going to take your data, they're going to exfiltrate their data, and then they're going to encrypt it. The file encryption, that single extortion, the pay and get the key, right? They're demanding ransom in exchange for your data. That was kind of old school now, right? Now they have double extortion where you're going to pay now or you're going to get breached. One of the recent attacks, a somewhat recent attack, was a law firm in LA where they stole celebrity data. So not only did the firm where they extorted, then the clients were extorted. So that's a double extortion. So, you know, the cyber criminals are taking advantage of making money at every point, right? You think that's bad, then you get to triple extortion, where then they disrupt or threaten to disrupt your operations. So they can do that in a myriad of fashion by, you know, overloading your network or causing more disruption. And then, you know, we saw that with our evil, right? They put in a back door, and then that allowed them to then get more money from individual people, right, within the company after they were breached. And then we see this with now where they're also doing victim shaming. That's kind of the new trend, and that's one that just, oh, that's bothersome. So you have some personal data on your computer, and by the way, you know, tisk, we'll go over that later, especially when it's your work laptop. Keep them separate. But that's where they're now doing all the above and then adding, hey, you know what, if you want to have your, you know, your daughter's wedding photos or your baby photos or what your family tree, now you're going to pay me because I've taken it. And so that's also pretty awful, but you can see the steps that are evolving, that are growing for them to make money, right? They're dependent on our vulnerabilities as humans and wanting our data and wanting things that we care about, right? Whether it's business and or personal, they're going after everything. There isn't anything that's off limits. So not fun. And we know that the increase of attacks are happening, the frequency and scope. We've seen it, you know, in my mind, it started off with, you know, home users, right, and our laptops, and something was encrypted there. We flipped into, you know, sharing data between our home and our office, and that expanded, right? And so this evolutionary process, larger, bigger, and then the ransomware groups are also growing, right? The first one, I hope I say this right, but Lapsus, this group targets big companies that have the profits or have the money to pay, right? And then they will say they steal data, so they exfiltrate the data. Microsoft and Okta were one or two examples of that. And then they threaten to release source code. And that's pretty awful. They did social engineering tactics. They tried to bribe or trick, and they did, employees and or their partners. So you can see, again, we're talking about the double, you know, methodology used. They're also employing multiple methods to get or garner the data from companies, right? Social engineering tactics, I mean, they work, right? They wouldn't do it if they didn't work.
This also shows what happens. Sorry.
Yeah,
This also shows what happens when you have so much money, when you can throw money at things. And so you can social engineer employees because you can offer them a lot of money to give away what may be to them innocuous secrets, but that can then be leveraged for entry into the organization.
Yeah, and I love this quote. Social engineering bypasses all technology, including firewalls. And that's from Kevin Mitnick. So we have to remember that speaks to really the crux of the issue is social engineering and our users. These folks, these gangs are calling support centers, they're calling help desks, they're recruiting from the insiders, right, and gaining access. They, in this example, Lapsus, they also have used the Telegram, the chat, right, app. So they're highly sophisticated. And they even went so far with Microsoft to do SIM swapping, so they were able to talk the company, the provider, into transferring the target's mobile number to their device. So that's concerning, right? So then we have Lockbit that was automatically looks for valuable targets. They encrypt all systems. They're generally gaining information via compromised servers or RDP. Initially dubbed the ABCD virus, then folks feel hindered enough to pay, and healthcare and financial institutions with that group most significant. But they also have the ability to self-propagate and spread on their own. That makes them a little bit more dangerous. They also have version 2, which is even more nefarious because they are able to now get into not just Windows systems, but other operating systems, and that's concerning. And they breached Accenture and Ateno, so a CRM platform. So very concerning. Black Cat, another big one. They encrypt your data as well, double extortion there. They are using the RaaS programming language, highly customizable. So that's of concern because it's making it easier for them to build and support. How they're entering networks vary, but they're also Windows and Linux. So that's another one that is concerning, right? In self-propagation.
Right.
They're using existing command line tools, even WMIC. So shout out to WMIC, but it's unfortunate it's used that way, and PSX exec, and then they're replicating itself on servers, bypassing UAC, modifies the bootloader, deletes volume shadow copies, and clears event logs.
It's worth pointing out that most of these payloads use things like PSExec, or they'll use AD-find, or they'll use various innocuously widely used Active Directory tools, because Active Directory's presupposition is once you've got a user ID and password, hey, you're good. I'm going to show you what we have that's out there, and it makes it easy to enumerate.
It does, and it's very concerning. And we're seeing this with all these groups. They are morphing, and they have morphed from some of them sharing this code. Wizard Spider is also known as Conti. They're incorporating recruiting people. They have like games to get and lure highly sophisticated cyber criminals. They generally target large organizations, what they call big game hunting, and they have various malware variants. And they also are doing supply chain attacks. So very concerning. Defense contractors, right? But their ultimate goal is to gain domain admin access. So
there's a little bit of fun involved in this, a little bit of as the ransomware turns in these descriptions, is because Conti came out in favor of Russia over Ukraine, which ticked off a number of their own affiliates, their own users, which then turned around and exposed a bunch of internal chats, exposed some of the Conti playbooks that shows how it operates. And when you have an Active Directory person that looks at the playbooks, they go, "Oh yeah, this is not hard." So,
yeah, it is. It is. And we have Vice Society. They just recently claimed a ransomware attack on Medical University Innsbruck. So they are a teaching hospital. So that's concerning. Took them offline for a bit. They're back up and running. They've been targeting schools, so educational systems. That's, remember when the days when that was off limits? Not any longer. So that's a couple of them. Darkseid, we know that one was huge. Colonial Pipeline, right? And that was in 2021. But that's half the fuel for the East Coast. I mean, that's just, to me, it's mind-blowing, right? We keep thinking, oh, it's not where I work, but it's going to be where you go, where you shop, where your medical services are, your schools, all of these things. And Darkseid, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was sorry. We keep stepping at each other because we've got stuff to say.
I have so much data on them.
I think a couple of worthwhile things to point out about Darkseid was, number one, they violated rule number 4, which was to cause so much trouble that they had federal law enforcement go after them.
They did.
Which caused them to shut down, caused them to lose some of the ransom. They've morphed into other things. But there's another there's a not quite as well-known aspect of this Darkseid and Colonial Pipeline attack, and that is, it's still in process from what I know, but the federal government is trying to fine Colonial Pipeline $1 million, which is not, I suppose, a be-all and end-all for a large organization, but fine them $1 million for the fact that they had no breach response plan. So what happened with Colonial Pipeline is that Darkseid attacked a Darkseid affiliate attacked their IT networks, and they had this ahead of time, knowing that their process control networks, they had no plan for this. They simply shut down all of their process control networks. That's what caused the outage. So the federal government was going after them for saying, look, you're a critical infrastructure organization. You have to have a plan. You can't just say, oh, we'll just throw the big knife switch and call it a day.
And I think we're going to see some changes, right, from governmental agencies in this space, right, as we evolve. We know we're a bit lagging in some of the legislation that's being passed, right, and then also requiring that software meet NIST standards and frameworks, right? So those are things that I hope will come about in addition to cryptocurrency, like somehow we have to regulate that in some form or fashion because of this.
Right. So when we talk about the growth of ransomware, one of the aspects of, again, if you look at it as a business, which it is, how do you grow it? Well, you grow it by specialization. So what used to be done by solo actors or a small group of actors now has massive specialization and massive different actors doing different things. So obviously you have the RaaS operators. They're the masterminds. They're the ones that own the whole service, as it were. You have the developers, which are responsible for evolving the tools and making them better, making them more sophisticated, and presumably making them easier for the unsophisticated actor to use because it increases profit. You have the affiliates themselves, and they're the customers. You have exploit brokers. So they're the ones, this is sort of exploit brokers and security researchers. There's a little bit of a gray area in the middle here. They both sort of do the same thing. They look for security vulnerabilities, and then the security researcher, generally has a code of ethics that they report it back to the vendor before they widely publish it and giving the vendor a chance to clear their vulnerabilities. Whereas the exploit broker says, oh, great, I've got an exploit. I've got a 0-day. I've got some vulnerability here. I will sell that to a ransomware operator that they can then incorporate into their software. You have initial access brokers. Those are the ones that specialize in phishing campaigns, in credential harvesting, in credential stuffing, doing all of these things that, as administrator types we've heard about, password brute force attacks, password spray attacks, credential harvesting, all of that designed to get into an organization, into a network through a phish or through a spare set of credentials. And then generally that's a first phase. The malware does not go in there. The ransomware doesn't go in that first phase. What they do is they insert a backdoor, and that backdoor is silent, is laying in wait, and then the access broker actually advertises the access to the organization on the dark web for $4,000 or $5,000. An affiliate pays $5,000 to gain access to corporation wide. They get the credentials and the access method, and they're in.
And think about that, $5,000 to gain access when the average ransom is like $100,000 or more than, right? So that $5,000 is a pretty low entry point for what they're going to gain. It's just, it's crazy to me.
Once you're in, you have intrusion specialists, which are sort of misnamed on some of the dark websites as pen testers. Usually, legitimate organizations describe pen testers as companies that you pay to test your own defenses and then help you shore up your defenses. Well, intrusion specialists are the ones that, given the back door, then attack They do internal reconnaissance. They gain domain dominance in Active Directory. They're the ones that are moving through the network. Sometimes they're also the exfiltration specialists, but some large organizations have exfiltration specialists. They're the ones that specialize in getting the data out, usually through a command and control server, through some firewall smoke and mirrors to try to stay under the radar. You have hosting providers because this ransomware has to have some kind of command and control to operate it remotely. And so you have to have hosting providers that are willing to house those command and control servers. Money laundering, and we all talk about cryptocurrency, but there is so much money going through the ransomware ecosystem that eventually it needs to be laundered somehow. As we talked about before, dark web exposure sites. So the data, hey, we will expose your data on this URL if you don't pay us. And to me, one of the most annoying ones of all are a specialization for negotiators. There's a whole branch of actors that just specialize in negotiation with victims, and they call themselves customer service, which is amazing. Yeah, amazing. So there's a lot. I mean, it is a major industry out there.
It is.
This is just a brief thing to talk about a typical attack chain, just as sort of a level set for people that may or may not have seen it. And this is this comes from Proofpoint. From the page is called "The First Step: Initial Access Leads to Ransomware." If you want to see more about it, I think what's interesting about this is it highlights the role of the initial access broker. So you have a threat actor, in this case, this would be an initial access broker, sends emails containing malicious Office documents. So in other words, a phishing campaign. And a user downloads the document and enables the macros, which drops a malware payload. So a successful phishing campaign drops a malware payload, but the payload is actually a backdoor. So nothing happens immediately as a result of that payload. But the IAB then uses the backdoor access to exfiltrate system information. So at this point, the access broker has the credentials to get in, has information about the environment because these run some directory service query tools or some basic query tools to give an idea of the size of the organization and what it might be doing. At that point, the IAB can then sell access to another threat actor. That's where the actual ransomware actor comes in, and they'll deploy a tool called like Cobalt Strike or Mimikatz or any one of many AD security tools, attack tools, via the backdoor access. And that's when the rest of it goes on. They get lateral access, they find the data that they care about, they exfiltrate the data that they care about, and the last step is they crypto lock the environment.
Yep. Yeah, so we talked about, what they're after, and then what we are seeing is multiple different methodologies for gaining access. One of them is unprotected RDP instances. So internet-facing RDP. I think we really need to scrutinize the access we've given. Even discussion of zero trust is something to consider with your team, but go back and really review that access and consider what accounts you are allowing, and then also the level of accounts that you're allowing. Like, does a DA need access to this or that? Like, really work and fine tune that, again, following that most restrictive model. BEC, the business email compromise, that's a new one, which is just unfortunately taking off, where we see accounts or email, right, being targeted from an internal upper level executive, and then appending a new email and working to basically social engineer that situation. Hey, I can't get on Teams. This isn't working. Do you mind calling me? Those type of things. So that's where we're seeing the increase in like the phishing and the spear phishing and vishing, all these new terms, right, coming out with, SMS and, hey, get on Slack, but I can't. So here's where I'm temporarily located, those type of things. So we want to be overly cautious. We want to always verify. I don't even want to say trust and verify. I'm just going to start with verify. We know that our weakest links are passwords, right? And folks using the same password on multiple applications. It's just got to change. We need to have strong passwords. We need to have fine-grained passwords. We need to be using password phrases. There's zero reason for passwords set to never expire. That's definitely my soapbox. Credential stuffing, we've been talking about that again with just the same user or a known password being across several different like SQL farms. That has to change. We can't be doing that anymore. I was teasing, a couple AD admins the other day, and Sean and I were talking about it as well. We've all been promoted into security. So, welcome to the team. We've got to step up our game. And then once it's in, we know that it's usually the indicators of exposure that are getting attacked. AD is 20 years old, right? And unfortunately, there's some easy attack vectors, right? You think about the attack surface area has increased. You want to make sure that you have something that is proactively monitoring and spotting for those. You've got to have that in place, right? That's going to give you the information to remediate the past 4 attack, like the most common, right? So what are you doing proactively in your environment to get that information? And then more importantly, act on that information.
So it's worth pointing out, if you're not familiar with what a password spray attack is, because it's a relatively new term, I like to think of a password spray attack as a brute force attack turned upside down. Yeah. So a brute force attack is one account and you're hammering a bunch of different passwords against it. A password spray is you have a common password and then you attempt it across at a wide range of accounts. And that has proved to be far more effective than brute force attacks because number one, it attacks the weakest link, which is the wetware between our ears, and they need to use simple passwords. And number two, it's a little harder to detect because instead of high activity against a single individual, you can see it spread out over even days to attempt to get in via the common password. So with that in mind, we've talked about all the problems. Let's actually talk about some solutions. And as you can see, I have here, it says no magic spells here. So it's not rocket science, but it is really important basics. And the way I sort of envision this is looking at the big picture of it is, number one, make it difficult to get in. Number two, make it difficult to escalate privileges in the environment. Number three, make it difficult to exfiltrate the data. And number four, make it easy to recover. So let's talk about the different parts of it. So this is, to me, this is really sort of the core, is the getting in part. We've talked about initial access brokers. We've talked about phishing. We've talked about all of that. And it all is coming back down to credentials. So this is an article, and I've got the link here on the page that shows that a survey that showed that cyber criminals have been able to penetrate 93% of corporate networks. So of course that doesn't mean your network, and of course it doesn't mean my network, but pretty much everyone else may have already been penetrated. And the main route of this is credential compromise. I think we know that by now. And a lot of the time, it doesn't have anything to do with password strength because they have done credential stuffing where they've grabbed a set of credentials, a user ID and a password, maybe a strong password off the dark web. And the user has used that strong password because if it was so hard to construct, why not use it more than one place? That's their corporate credentials. Bang, the threat actor has their credentials no matter how strong they are. The IABs have shown that they are very successful in getting RDP credentials and credentials for VPN solutions. Again, one factor, user ID, and then, it's your user ID and one factor of authentication, which is the password. It comes back down to the stuff that we hear again and again and again. MFA, specifically for your on-premises environments, MFA for Active Directory. Remember, MFA stops account compromise because even if they've harvested their credentials off of reused credentials off of a dark web and They're trying to get in. An MFA challenge will stop them. And there's been a lot of talk about SMS and how SMS is not as secure an MFA channel as it used to be. But don't let that stop you. Having an SMS as an MFA method is far, far better than no MFA method at all. I personally am a big proponent of the authenticator, an authenticator app with a push notification. It's a cat and mouse game. They go back and forth. There are ways.
It is, but
yeah.
Sorry, Sean, to interrupt. One thing I was thinking about, we're always taught, right, growing up in this industry, that you never want to have a single point of failure. And if you just have an account password, you do have a single point of failure. You're actually trusting your weakest link, right? And that's just a bad idea from the get-go. So at this point in time, and considering the threat landscape, there's absolutely no reason you shouldn't have deployed this, or you don't have this deployed.
Right. And these solutions are not that expensive. I mean, they're a few dollars per user per month, but they're a lot less expensive than a ransomware extortion. So
yeah, being offline and rebuilding your environment is going to be very costly, and it damages your reputation, your product, everything.
Right. So, I mean, I would really boil this slide down to two things. One, MFA. Go do it, MFA. Number two, eliminate common passwords. So this is what you need to use to blunt password spray attacks. This is what, in the updated password guidelines that NIST and Microsoft have published for years, is eliminating part of the updated password policy recommendations is to eliminate common passwords. And this is a pretty easy solution to implement, folks. So from an Active Directory point of view, you can buy a third-party password filter. So if you're not an AD expert, an Active Directory password filter is installed on a domain controller, and real time when the user tries to update their password, it evaluates it against a set of criteria. You can buy a third-party password filter that is tied into, say, Troy Hunt's Have I Been Pwned database or other common password databases. And at password change time, it will reject the common password. So it will reject 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or it will reject something that may make it past the built-in AD password complexity filter, but is easily guessed by the computers that are guessing our passwords today. So that's easy to do, and that will really help increase the security of your Active Directory environment. Another tool that I'm fond of, if you have an Azure Active Directory subscription, is Azure AD Password Protection. So this is common password protection. It's a password filter that installs on your domain controllers, but it uses the power of Azure Active Directory and its own common password list that it updates on a regular basis to reject common passwords. So MFA, reject common passwords. If you take nothing else, from my viewpoint, if you take nothing else out of here, that's a big deal.
I agree. Have to grab my prop for this.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm ready.
I'm not sure what her prop is, but I think we're going to find out. So reconnaissance. So once they're in, what do you do? Oh, I know what I know what the prop is. So it's not just us. It's universally recognized that Active Directory is the path that the threat actors use to get around. That's the easiest way to get things done. This is where we bring up Purple Knight. Okay, so Purple Knight. There's her Purple Knight prop. That's right. So free utility. If you're not running Purple Knight right now, you need to be running it. It's a free utility. Yes. We don't charge you for it. We don't see the data. We don't see anything like that. This is provided free to the community to help you evaluate and reduce your Active Directory attack surface. All you do is run it. Doesn't require admin rights in the domain.
Exactly.
Doesn't even
And
require admin rights on the client. Go ahead, Leaks.
And well, what I love about it, Sean, is one, it gives you a really detailed security posture, an overview of you, if you will, of your environment at a single point in time. What's really nice about this is this could be a process that you could very easily implement, right? It's free, it's easy to implement, like you said. You don't have to be an administrator. So you would have captures of each point in time. So knock on wood, if you were breached, you know where you stood on this date. So it could be used as a comparison. The other thing I love about it, it gives you detailed information for paths to remediation. So some items that you and your team can work on to fix, like the low-hanging fruit that will tighten up your environment. I think that's a really nice, bonus.
Right. So basically, make your environment harder to roll over and play dead.
Exactly.
The last part, though, is also very important. And as I said, you have to recognize the fact that you may be breached, that it may happen. Excuse me. So you have to plan for compromise. You have to plan for recovery. And I'm going to let you talk to that for a second while I get a drink of water.
I figured. Yeah. So it's something that we never want to have happen, of course, but it is something that we need to factor in. So what we need to do is make sure that our backups are definitely available, but we want to be following that 3-2-1 backup strategy, right? Multiple copies, off-site, immutable storage. You also want to make sure that you aren't required or still leveraging AD in order to restore your environment. So one of the places I worked, they said, go ahead and get the information off SharePoint in order to have the restore document or the recovery document. So let's think about how we build out our environments in the downstream apps. Like, that is something to factor in, right? We want to have an automated recovery process. We want that time to be as fast as possible, right? We want to be able to restore our domain controllers quickly. And it's not just that. We then have to make sure the environment is secure and that it's ready to turn over, that it's a trusted environment. We don't want to reintroduce malware. So when you do a restore, are we reintroducing your operating system, or are we introducing a clean operating system, right? That's a factor. What about sysvol? Has that been checked? Things of those along those lines are things we have to think about, because we're going to have to go through all that and reset your passwords, change your curb tickets, all of those things. So we want to look at all of our options, but the ultimate goal is not only a fast restore time, but a trusted restore environment.
Yeah, we have our incident response team. We have I like to think just about the largest collection of Active Directory experts anywhere nowadays. And our incident response teams have responded to companies under crisis that had backups of Active Directory, but guess what? Their backup system were AD integrated, so they couldn't recover their backups, or their backups were encrypted by the malware actors.
Yep.
So we're getting near the end of the hour. We've been blabbing on for a while. Okay, I've been blabbing on. Alex has been shedding pearls of wisdom. So some final thoughts on this. Think like a threat actor, because that will help you understand where they're going and why they're doing what they're doing. Remember that it's a numbers game too. It's the more successful intrusions. So it's about the numbers. It's about them moving through organizations to get as much profit as they can. And even though you read about the SolarWinds and you read about these other exotic intrusions, most of the time, it's not about the exotic intrusions. They don't care. Maybe, I don't know, I'm not privy to where they sit down in the cafeteria with other threat actors and say, oh, I used this cool exploit today. What did you use? No, they want to get to the data. They want to get back to our principles. They want to get to the data as quickly as they can. They want to get it out. They want to make the money, and they want to move on. So they're going to use tried and true methods. So to me, that means come down to sort of my final thought, or our final thought is, remember the bear, okay? So this is an old joke, but it maps to this. Threat actors are after your data, and it's a numbers game. If you make it challenging for them, especially given the lower skill set potentially that ransomware as a service now gives you. If you make it challenging or time consuming for the threat actor, maybe there's a chance that they will move on to some other easier to target victim. The story, of course, as you can see from here, is you don't have to be faster than the bear. You just have to be faster than your fellow campers, and maybe avoid an unexpected meal. So we're kind of wrapped up here. That's about, I'm sure Alix has got more things to add on this. She's got more things to pound on you about the things you should be doing, as she works with a lot of our companies. But if anybody has any questions, or we'd love to chat about this sort of thing, we're happy to have the discussion. Definitely,
anytime. And I just want to say that I'm not sure I like that analogy, Sean, since you're a runner. I don't know if that's really too fair for me, but so noted. And we do want to say, Tom,
the next time we go camping, yeah.
Yes, exactly, which will be never, by the way, but yes.
Right, you're not a camper, I forgot.
No, indoorsy. Okay. Yeah, but if you folks do think of any questions, even if you don't have them now, please feel free to look us up on LinkedIn, and it'd be fun to chat. It's always fun to chat with AD folks.
And you guys out in the audience, you can hit on the bio button down there in that widget panel, and you can you'll see their bios, but you can actually email them directly that way too. So if you have any questions directly, you can shoot them that way. I actually have a handful of questions for you guys. I've been taking notes as we went.
Oh, that's right.
I want to just, some are like more anecdotal than anything else, but I love how you keep referring to some of these folks are lower skill set. It's a nice way of calling them dumb. I like that. Because they're ransomware people, right? We can call them almost anything we want. So you guys can call them whatever you want. Threat actors is a nicer way to say it. But one thing I do want to clarify, though, on one of your slides back there, you had mentioned offline backups. You have to make sure these are offline, folks. If you can reach them via computer, it's probably not offline, right? So watch out for that. Maybe have an actual backup printed out of a plan that you had at one point. Just an anecdotal thing that I've got here. One thing I did want to ask you guys about, do you notice threat actors going into Outlook and adding in rules so that they're kind of thwarting any kind of forensics measures that you guys are able to find or redirecting emails and things like that? Are you guys noticing that stuff too?
That is a real challenge because I've also known, I'm sure, Tom, you've also heard the stories of where, because they have access to email, they can see the email that says, okay, here's the crisis bridge. They will actually get on the crisis bridge and lurk on the crisis bridge to hear what's going on. So there's all sorts of circumstances where, people are, they have to communicate via cell phone, or they have to do FaceTime with each other and hold the screen up at each other. So we have a whole body of knowledge and a whole body of experts around disaster recovery. And we actually we have a crew called the Masters of Disaster. And we specialize in teaching about disaster recovery around Active Directory and where it fits in the larger scheme of things, because Active Directory is a horrific product to actually have to do a full disaster recovery, a forced recovery on if you've never done it before. So yes, one of the takeaways in an incident response situation is, what are your out-of-band communication methods? Do you set up a signal chat with all of the people ahead of time? Do you do, these are the things that you have to think through.
Yes. Yeah, and they need to be definitely solidified and known and advertised.
When you said the Colonial Pipeline stuff, you're like, they didn't even have a plan. I was like, what? Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
The ones that's honestly, the truth that came out.
$1 million is enough. If you didn't have a plan, I'm sorry. I've been doing this stuff 15 years. I know better than that. Right. I have a plan every day when I get out of bed.
Well, a lot of people have a plan in place, but they don't actually practice it. And sorry, Sean, I mean, that's another thing is we talk about it. We have our backups, but have you tested them? Have you done this? Have you restored to a lab? Have you then tested fully your downstream apps? Those are things a lot of folks haven't thought about and they haven't done. We don't always have the resources, but it doesn't take a lot to just build that off or segment, make an isolated lab and do that practice.
Yeah, we do deployment workshops all the time, and one of the things that we do is look at dependencies on Active Directory, and we talk companies through. And we've practically every company, and I mean some big companies with a lot of smart people, as we really do deep discovery, there's some point where they go, oh yeah, and they realize the dependency that they haven't had.
Yep. And then someone in here had managed. Oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, it's easy to forget. We were talking about this before the call. There's just so much going on now in all of our worlds. People are working from anywhere. Alexandra's at home. I'm at Secure World headquarters, but last week I was at home. Sean's somewhere. He's in Dallas, I think. But it's very easy for folks to just kind of forget, or you think somebody else did it. So we've just got to really double down and communicate a lot better, I feel like.
Yeah, I noticed. No,
Go ahead,
I was just going to say, I noticed in the Q&A that Raf has a couple of questions from Amdocs about password management. How do we manage passwords, and as you have so many of them? I mean, so there's a couple of aspects to it. One obviously is using something like a PAM solution to manage passwords into privileged systems. That's one aspect of it. But I'm a big fan of password managers. And
Me too.
you at the way I describe it is, and I did this years ago, is you just sort of have to bow down to your robotic masters and say, please generate me a 25-character complex password I will never remember, and put it in the password manager, and create yourself a gnarly master password that has multi-factor authentication against it. It's not perfect, but it's way better than saying, oh, I have some method that, that I use to remember it. Because if you can remember it, a machine can figure it out fast.
Yes. Yeah. What was it? 8 characters takes 5 hours, and it's just crazy. It doesn't take that long to, unfortunately, reverse engineer passwords. So we want to make them cryptic, right, and difficult. Right. We don't want to be able to memorize them.
Right. I mean, I'm spending a lot of time many years around the Microsoft identity people. The way I try to think of it now is a password isn't, we think of passwords differently. Just think of the password as yet another attribute in an authentication session. There's also a user ID. There's also a browser ID. There's an IP address. There's a device identity. There's all of these things. There's 100+ things that you can evaluate nowadays in a modern authentication system. The password is only one of them. And if you rely just on that one, you're relying way, way, way too much on something that's way too easily hacked.
Okay. Is it because passwords are such a personal choice that we need to take that personal part out? Because you're like what you said before, like take a 25-character password, and it's probably not going to have anything that I have anything to do with, right? Do you think that would make it more effective for folks?
Well, that's certainly the movement. So the move towards passwordless is starting to gain a little momentum. It's supported for a limited number of use cases right now. Typically, if you're a cloud-only environment, it's much easier. Microsoft is really pushing the envelope on passwordless, but there are plenty of other identity organizations that are working towards that. Use a FIDO key instead of a password. Use a FIDO key and a PIN, and the PIN only applies to that local device, so you don't have to worry about a threat actor from Russia getting a hold of it and hacking your account. Windows Hello is becoming more ubiquitous in organizations. That's a big help. It'll take time. It's frustratingly slow, and we all look at our spouses and their consumer experiences to recognize how far we have to go before it's easy to work with.
Yes, for sure.
Okay.
Your spouse doesn't count, Alex. He works for Nike.
He does.
I really enjoyed our conversation today, both of you, Alexandra and Sean. One last thought out of each of you. I know you kind of brought it up a couple minutes ago, but Alex, give us one final thought.
Be proactive. I want you to look at what you can do in your environment and do one thing, just to tighten up your environment. Look at what you can do and just do one thing. Make it a goal of a sprint cycle or whatever, whatever it is, just one small thing to tighten up your environment.
I like it.
And for my final thought, I would say I'll make that one small thing, two small things. One small thing, one, run Purple Night. Two, do something about it.
Yes.
Exactly. And not only that, guess what? That'll make you look good for your bosses too, to show that how you increased Active Directory security.
Yes.
Right.
Agreed.
And that stuff is available in the resources tool down there at the bottom of your menu bar at the bottom. So check that out. If you have any problems, email me. You can also download your certificate of attendance now, so that's available for you. The thing I would add is, like I said at the beginning, vigilance. As we're moving into the 4th of July weekend, watch out, folks. You do not want to receive a phone call Friday evening from anybody within your organization telling you, guess what? We just got burned. It's our turn. So don't do it. Take our experts' advice that we just heard from and do something. Do something before Thursday. And have a great weekend, everybody. But we do have more remote sessions coming up very, very soon. We've got this week, API Best Security Practices on Thursday. Social engineering, it all starts with that, right? Coming up on the 7th, Cybercrimes Force Multiplier with Mr. Brian Krebs. I'll be doing a fun interview with him. Looking forward to that one. 10 of the craziest cyber attacks seen in the world. Sorry, I got excited about that one. Seen in the wild and how you can avoid them. That is with Mr. Roger Grimes over at Know4. And achieving business. Oh, you know Roger, okay. Achieving business sustainability with cyber risk quantification. That's happening on the 19th. So I hope you'll tune in on for the Roger Grimes one then. So since that one kind of piqued your interest, I heard. So anyway, that closes us out for today. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We'll see you at the next remote session on Thursday. Have a great week, everybody.
Great. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Tom.